All right. Well, very excited. We've finally got ourselves sorted. We're a few minutes late. We are here for Beyond the Canvas Conversations with Gamma. This is our 10th episode, and we are having a focus on photography. We've got some incredible photographers who release work on Bitcoin and luckily enough release work with us on Gamma. And we've got a few of them here today. Some might join us as well as they are able to jump in. But we're joined by the very talented and fantastic Gabriella, Rachel, and Intrepid, who are going to introduce themselves in more detail. I am Brett Herscope, or Eli Herf. Call me whatever you like. Head of growth at Gamma. Really excited to be with you all today for today's show. So without further ado, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves. We can start with you, Gabriella, and then we'll go to Rachel, and then we'll go to Intrepid. Tell people who you are, what you do. You're a photographer, that's why you're here, as well as other many talents. But yeah, welcome and thanks for joining us all.
Oh, thank you so much, Brett, and thank you, Gamma. And I'm also very grateful to be here sharing this space with other talented artists from the Gamma family. So my name is Gabriela, and I am based in the border between Tijuana and San Diego, like the very complex U.S.-Mexico border. I am a photographer and also a film director working with photography and mixed media like from 8 years ago till now. And recently, 3 years ago, I also incorporated generative AI into my workflow. From filmmaking to mixed media with photography, generative AI, and other techniques. I'm a big fan of just exploring different mediums because I feel like that's how my mind works a lot of like mixing like physical with digital and all in between. And yeah, I have joined Gamma for a year now. It's my Gamma anniversary a few days ago, so I'm very
Happy
happy
anniversary.
that. Thank you. Thank you. I have found a really nice home and place for my art, not only at Bitcoin but within Gamma. So I'm very grateful to all the Gamma team. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you for sharing. Rachel, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Goodness, sorry. I'm like, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, super, super. My Wi-Fi is really shitty, so I'm sorry. Can I swear on these things?
Yeah,
Okay.
of
My
course.
Wi-Fi is
We're all
very
human.
slow. But wow, thank you so much for having the space for photography. I feel like this is sorely needed in the space, but that is because I am biased. My name is Rachel Wood, for those of you who don't know me. And I am a Gamma partner artist, so that's pretty exciting. And I sold my first 2 ordinals, was it last week? I don't know.
I
It was
think
during,
so.
yeah, it was last week. And I was like super, super excited because I dropped, obviously, with Gamma here as a print of a picture of volcanoes in Iceland. And that was right before my Bitcoin Ordinals talk at NFC Lisbon on their stage. So that was like really exciting to say that, yes, I have like sold Ordinals. So that was really cool. Sorry, I totally got distracted. So yes, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a photographer and I started photography back in 2019 when I quit the like whole corporate hamster wheel of life. And I was like, I want to explore the world. So I was like, what do I do on the road? I like photography. I guess I'll buy a camera. So I bought a camera in 2019 and I set out with like a one-way ticket to Peru just to try to chase, these moments that I had just seen, pictures of in the news and like National Geographic and things like that. So ever since then, it's just kind of been a crazy, crazy ride of just trying to go to remote places, trying to just like explore my curiosity of seeing cultures and people and mostly animals because I really like animals. But then crypto was like really, really amazing because it's connected me with these incredible people. And I've actually met Intrepid Rob here. He was so kind to let me hop into his car for a week. Like a stranger from the internet to hop in his car for a week to go in the middle of the Australian outback, just to see a really, really cool historic flooding event. So that's really cool. You should check out his meme card. It's alive, because that is a scene from what we saw, which was like one of the coolest experiences in my life. So now I'm rambling, but to sum it up, I love photography. I love adventuring. I love this world, and I really love to preserve these shots that really represent a world that is changing and will never be seen again, and preserving it for people for generations to come. And that's why I really love Bitcoin. That's why I love ordinals on Bitcoin, because of that digital permanence. So yeah, that's me.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, we'll definitely dive into more of that. Intrepid, welcome. Great to have you. Are you sitting on the boat right now, or where are we getting you in to this live stream from?
I am in the boat, but it's sadly on the hard, so there's no water under the boat. So I'm mothballing the boat for a while to take a bit of a land break. So, but yeah, 4 years on the boat. It's been a crazy journey. But yeah, but my background, I've been a photographer for quite a long time. I started in the late 90s. And so I've kind of been through all the phases of the internet with photography. I registered Intrepid photos.com in 2001. So I've had the pseudonym for a long time. And, used to shoot slide film, obviously, back in those days, do assignment work, places like Nepal and Pakistan, and lived through the, Web 1, then Web 2 with the Instagram era, and into Web 3. And I got into Web 3 in 2017, blogging on blockchain-based blogging sites like Hive and Steemit. And then in 2000, I kind of got interested in NFTs, and early 2001 minted my first photography NFTs on Ethereum, and came to Bitcoin. When ordinals came along, I was pretty taken by the concept of being able to have a little bit of graffiti on the side of the world's best blockchain. And so I minted a series called Rare Earth about 9 months after ordinals released. And happy to be a Gamma partner artist now and have some prints going. And yeah, that's kind of my background. But I do kind of adventure photography, wilderness photography, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I know that you've got a wild story and it can take quite some time to go through, but I'm sure parts of that will come out in our discussions today. But I'm interested from all of you, when you first picked up a camera, obviously, Rachel, you said it was when you decided to go traveling, or you decided to go kind of explore, live somewhat a nomadic lifestyle. Had you studied anything art related prior, or had you had, I guess, what stimulated you or motivated you to buy a camera and for that to be a passion that you pursued? Yeah, I'd love to, did it go further back? Were you a kid and you liked using your parents' camera, or how did it work?
Well, I feel like such a noob when I hear, people like Rob who have done this for decades, or, I really did just throw myself into photography back in 2019. Of course, I've always, used my phone or like those little point and shoot cameras, like on my travels. But I never really looked at it as a form of art until actually, I would say I never really thought my own photography was art until I came into crypto and Web3 in 2021. That was the end of 2021. But I have done art before. I went to a Waldorf school. I grew up in a Waldorf school, so we did a lot of like hands-on learning. We did a lot of like adventuring in the wilderness. We did a lot of, everything from metalsmithing to stained glass lamp making and pottery and, all of that. So my background was very diverse creatively. But then when I went to college for pre-med medical anthropology, I was like, no, that's not going to be me, because I was told and this is something that I really want everyone to hear. Don't tell kids they're not creative, because I was told throughout my entire childhood, I was not a creative person, that my creativity was ranked very, very low. And I listened to those people. I listened to those teachers. I listened to those doctors and testers. And I was like, well, since I'm not good at it, I'm not going to do it. But obviously that was something that was really missing in my life. And I've done quite a few other like iterations of who I am. But then, when I really wanted to travel and I was like, I really hate this corporate ladder that I'm climbing, I was good at it. And, I was happy. I was making money, all my needs were met. Um, but, there's that something missing. And I think the camera, even though I've traveled quite a bit before 2019, the camera really helped bring direction to me. And I like to say it was kind of like my compass. The camera is my compass because it really has directed me to some of the most remote, incredible, and remarkable places in this world. So, yeah. And it led me to crypto, which, of course, led me to seeing photography as art. So, yeah, really thankful for that. I forgot your original question.
No, that's fine. You definitely answered it. It is fascinating. What about for you, Gabriella? Like, I love that Rachel said that the camera is her compass. And I guess, when you find something, that being a metaphor, but also probably being quite literal sometimes, it probably really takes you to where you need to go to take it in a more literal sense. But how have you found it? I know, when did you first pick up a camera? I know when we did our podcast together, you talked about where you sort of, I guess, had creative inspiration from. But yeah, do you remember the first time you took a photo or you thought about photography or you started, thinking about using it as a tool professionally?
Yeah, so I just want to say I love what you said, Rachel, about not telling people they're not like. I love that. It's very good to remark that. But yeah, so I remembered that when I was like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life in high school, because I don't know why society needs you to know what you're going to do with the rest of your life at that age. But before that, I always had like inspiration from my grandmother and my mom. My grandmother was a painter and she also did like, I don't know how you say, knitting and like she did all kinds of stuff, pottery. So she was a great inspiration for me. But I was really into filmmaking when I was in high school. So my logic was I need to learn first about photography in order to be a filmmaker, because that's like the basic of like movement in film. It's like a frame, right? 24 frames per second, etc. So that was like my logic at the moment of being a teenager trying to decide what to do with her life. So my parents had this little digital camera, which was more like a recording camera. And I used to make videos with my friends. And like at that point, small digicams, which are now like super, I don't know, they came back from the dead. Like the little digicams were something that people used a lot. So I had those that my friends lent to me. So at some point I was like, okay, I really want to learn this. I really want to understand how to take a photo as I want to. Like, what if I want something out of focus or something like that? So I took an analog class course. So it was the last before the university took it out of the program and destroyed the whole darkroom. And that was really sad. But I got to be the last generation to use it at the school. So that's like the first time I remember like intentionally taking portraits of people on the street. And I really love like getting close to somebody and ask them for a photo. Like I had it didn't make me nervous to do that. So I realized I like getting to know people and their backgrounds and what they were doing. So that really was connected to filmmaking and what I wanted to do with my life. So that was kind of the first step. And from that moment, I have always carry a camera with me, like to trips or doing photo shoots with my friends. So I started making portraits and just collaborations with close friends. And that's honestly where my school of photography was: hands-on experimentation and YouTube tutorials and helping out other professionals that I already knew, like friends that were already working on it. That's how I got started. And then it just became part of my life.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it can obviously like evolve and adapt, and you learn as you go. And it's so true about. It's interesting. So prior to me working at Gamma, so for the last 3 years, I was a primary school teacher for 10 years. So quite a long time in education, and now I'm a parent. And one thing which as is Intrepid, and he could probably attest to it, that yeah, your words are very powerful, and so even if you don't think something, you think maybe that comment, like it's almost a bit of pressure on adults, really. But the way you speak to kids is so important because kids are creative. All kids are creative. Like the longer that I've worked in the space, the more I've realized that everybody, I know it sounds a little cliche, that everybody is an artist in their own way. It might not be through the ability to draw or paint or, but like, for example, myself, it might be through like the ability to communicate or the ability to, teach people. It's so many different styles in which you can be an artist. So it's a super important thing. I love that you brought that up, Rachel. Intrepid, what about yourself? Obviously this experience on the boat has probably evolved your photography a lot, but like you said, you registered Intrepid Photos back in 2001? You've obviously had a camera for a long time. Where did it start?
Yeah, so I grew up in suburban Australia in the 80s, just like Bluey's dad. And basically, yeah, my dad had a darkroom out in a shed in the backyard. And so, he was always into photography and we would develop photos in the backyard. And then when I was 17, I basically convinced my dad I could borrow his camera, and I was actually doing some futures trading. I was always into trading as a teenager, and I was trading 25 leverage ASX futures, and I made some money doing that. And I was like, wow, I've got all this money. What do I do with it? And it wasn't a lot of money. I think it was like $2,500, but this was in like 97. And I bought a ticket to Indonesia and, basically took my dad's camera and went for 4 months to Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand. And this was 97, if you may not remember, but it was the currency crisis in Southeast Asia. So it was kind of also, there's a lot of proto-crypto thoughts going through my head at that time, because basically every week my money would kind of double. Like, so, when I was in Indonesia, I'd go and exchange money, and every week I'd have twice as much money. And the next week there's twice as much money. And then after like 6 weeks, there were riots on the street in Jakarta, and I went and bought all this camera gear at like 80% off, because there was kind of not a lot of internet back then. And so I had kind of connections to the world that I knew that the currency was collapsing, and these stores didn't realize they couldn't restock at the same prices. So I ended up buying a lot of camera gear in Jakarta just before the riots. And it's a long story, but it actually was an extra in a movie in Jakarta, and then the riots went full on the street, and I went to Singapore just to escape, and then up through Malaysia, and then the ringgit collapsed, and then into Thailand, and the Thai baht collapsed, and so my $2,500, it ended up being almost like $10,000, because it just kept doubling every time. Sorry, there's just an airplane going past, but so that was kind of formative for me. And then for the next 5 years, I did a double degree in international business and chemical engineering, and I took basically 4 months off every year to go traveling. So the next year I went to Vietnam. It had just opened up. It was 6 months after it opened up from communism in 1998. So it was quite incredible, really. It was still permit based. If you wanted to move, you had to get permits. And then went into Laos. It was still communist at the time. And then ran out of money again, and then went to New Zealand just to live in huts in the Alps. And then I started running a rock climbing club, and then started getting to rock climbing in a big way. And then that kind of shifted, I guess, into more assignment work, shooting slide film. Went to the Middle East in 2000, before September 11th, for the turn of the millennia, and shot some work on the border with Libya in the desert out there, and went to Nepal, and sponsored by a trekking company, got 2 Sherpas, and spent 6 weeks doing an assignment there. And so it kind of was evolved, I guess, just out of a desire to, I was just obsessed with the world and these amazing things in the world. And then I wanted to kind of convey that and show people back at home, what was actually out there. I think, we take it for granted now too, that there's so much saturation on the internet that you can kind of was talking to someone the other day about it. Like, it's hard to travel somewhere now and not have seen it already before you get there. And it's something I really miss because, some of the most, like I went to Jordan and saw Petra, and I had never seen a picture of it. And it was just kind of blew my mind. And the thought of being able to do that now is obviously you'd have to be living in a cave to have not seen pictures of all these amazing places. And I think that's why I ended up on a sailboat out in really remote places, because I do love that, turning up to an island and never having seen it before. But I'll pass it on. I can see Dave's.
Yeah, well, no, it's fascinating that you say that, and we will get NLV to introduce himself because he's just joined us, which is awesome to have him. But before that, it's interesting to comment on that as the world opens up, and because of the digital sphere in which we live in, obviously you can just, like, for lack of a better expression, Google image search basically anything and see it through someone else's eyes. So I would be really curious after we meet NLV to talk about how do you take a photo of places or of people when it's been done before and still have a distinct style. Like, it's quite obviously there are different ways, and there's new technologies, and there's drones, and there's all these things. But yeah, in a world that's getting saturated in many different ways, it would be a challenge, and I'd love to hear how you approach that problem. It's funny, just to comment on that again, I caught up for a coffee yesterday with another photographer and another Aussie who's a Gamma partner artist, Nate Hill, who you might know. And he just went on a trip to Iceland recently and took some incredible photographs. And it was on like a photography tour where there were some pros, paid pros like him. And then also just, I suppose, people like me who curious about photography and wanted to learn a few tips and tricks and go to a nice place to, fascinating place to take photographs. And he said, obviously you can tell there are ways in which the people who perhaps are a bit more experienced could take shots in comparison to the others. So I think, that's going to be really interesting to explore. But before we do that, welcome NLV. I don't know if I'm going to call you New Light Visuals or NLV. I know we're going through a bit of a rebrand, so I'll let you introduce yourself. A real pleasure to have you here. Another super talented artist and photographer, one of your skill sets, who we're lucky enough to have on Gamma, who's joined us on Beyond the Canvas. How are you?
Oh, very well, mate. Thank you. I guess part of my story is that my kids control my life. And so I work in part of the Click Create team. You can ask them. I'm often late to meetings, so I apologize. But I'm here and I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me. A little bit about myself, I guess, is photography pretty much saved me mentally, and just opened up a whole new way of processing the world as it was at the time, which was quite stressful. COVID happened, and that led to a pretty devastating nervous breakdown for me, which was one of the biggest challenges I've been through. But having photography in my life and having already found photography, that really helped me through that. There was a time where I literally was unable to function, and that's been a healing process ever since that time. And getting out with the camera at any time I can, and just being alone, solitary with nature, particularly the ocean and coastal areas that I'm lucky to live near. Documenting that has given me this sort of, it's hard to put into words, but this real freedom and natural kind of healing process for my nervous system. So that's probably the key thing that photography is for me. But it's just been a really interesting journey as well. I've been an artist my whole life, and as you guys may know, as you mentioned, the rebrand, I started out as an illustrator and then graffiti artist. And it was this kind of interesting journey to get to photography. And it was through working in the industry, I became a graphic designer, and I found the obsession with cameras through directing video shoots. And I'm now a cinematographer myself, and I just love everything to do with cameras. I was on shoots and I would basically nerd out on the gear and kind of started to drift away from, art direction and is everything, and production manager and is everything, am I getting the shots I need to? How did you get that shot? And what's the light setting there? And what's that lens? And what does that do? And so, yeah, it's sort of, I realized that that's what I loved, not the directing. And I picked up my own camera set and found the drone through my production company. I decided I needed to upgrade, and then that was for video. I was doing drone video, but I started to take photos to work on my framing and composition, because that really helps with cinematography. A lot of cinematographers will have a film camera with stills and process their own film for that reason, because it really does lock you into getting that shot absolutely perfect. And so I took that approach, and then I realized that aerial photography was unreal, and that just became an obsession over the last 9 years. And so that work that's on Gamma, the shark shot, is definitely part of that journey. Finding marine life is very enjoyable because they're very elusive and very hard. And once you do find them, it's a real rush. The whales and seals and turtles. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Love it. Well, yeah, it's so fascinating. I know that there is that expression out there that art heals. So I'm so glad that it's been so helpful for you. And yeah, they would very tough times. Again, I think that it harks back to like what Rachel said about the camera being her compass. Kind of like sounds like it gave you direction and meaning and something to do. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating how there is that cohesion in different stories. And Intrepid, it's funny you said your dad had a darkroom out in the shed. My mum, just like hobbyist photographer, our garage had a darkroom in it. So I kind of grew up with a bit of a love for it. And I remember doing photography in year 9. That's taking me back as an elective, and we had a darkroom at school. It was all very exciting. It's also different now, with the advent of, well, they were, starting to become popular even back then, albeit quite some years ago when I was in year 9, but of digital cameras and drones and all of this technology to take photos. Yeah, it's, obviously for you all, I'd love for you to comment on it as we start to talk about how do you, I guess, keep your work true to you, and in a world that's where anyone can pick up their iPhone and take a photo. There's a lot of photographers out there, but how, as professionals and as paid photographers, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I just mean it's amazing in that way. It's great that my son can pick up my phone and take a photo. I find kids love it. It's inspiring for them to capture things. But yeah, how do you? And I guess you can again, just a reminder, you can ask each other questions. It doesn't have to all be led by me. But I've got so many questions for you. Also, we're not going to get stuck. But yeah, how do you keep your work unique, and how do you stay fresh, and how do you I suppose find that like differentiation in your work? Go for it, Gabriella, if you like.
Yeah, so I feel like, well, at least for me, I get a lot of inspiration on being able to, as I said before, to go through different mediums. I feel like some ideas will be best if they live inside a film, and some of my ideas will be best if live in a cyanotype or in a photography. But I guess it's just staying true to that process, which is my own. And I guess everybody has their own creative process regarding that. But for me, is that like respecting that sometimes I will make just my laundry will become a dark room, and then I will be doing like some film work and cyanotypes, and whichever goes my mind, paint those cyanotypes, scan them, and then maybe just intervene them a little bit. But other times I just want to take portraits, and I love portraiture because it's just this way to explore and have a conversation without really talking. That portraits I have done, I have not made inscriptions of those just yet. Maybe portraits of flowers, which I do really love making as well. I feel like they have so many like personality. So that is like something I do love to explore as well. So still life, and having all of these different mediums like hang on in there. And yeah, so part of the inspiration of this creative process is like in an interview I heard David Lynch said that he also did that with his work. Like sometimes he will paint and sometimes he will make a film about the idea and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I take over my process, and just to be able to have these pieces now live on live on the blockchain and just being preserved like forever. It's just it makes sense to me not just to put them out in the internet, which is amazing to share something on Instagram or website or whatever, but now they're actually like safe at the blockchain, right? So that's part of, I don't know if I answered the question though. I got a little bit carried over.
That's the whole point. It's
Yeah,
meant
yeah.
to be, you know, just your thoughts. And I do love that. And on your final point, it's been something that's really struck me from the start with the ability to, I guess, preserve anyone's art, photography or not. But it's quite special. And I've probably overwritten it now that it is poetic, that with photography, you're capturing a moment. That moment's gone. Even if it's of, like you said, Gabriella, of the flower, that particular moment of the portrait of the flower, the still life, that particular moment is gone. That was a piece of history. There's a timestamp, you know, on the digital camera. That can't be repeated. And so to preserve that, it's very special. And then as NLV was saying, you know, the shark or the whale, they're not going to like stop and stay still for your photo. Like, you know, smile, pause, stop there. You know, you're in a great spot. You know, you really are capturing that moment, or, you know, all of your work. I could go through each of you and come up with an example, but I like this. We've made the start, but we've been joined by another Gamma partner artist and another, it's just this where it's all Aussie guys who are here. Andrew, who is a photographer on Gamma. You're going to get another Aussie accent, but Andrew, we'll get you to jump into the conversation. But before you do, give us a brief kind of, I guess, introduction on who you are and what you do, and tell us, I guess, make sure to include intense camera movement, your ICM style.
Well, first off, can you hear me?
We've got you loud and clear.
Oh, amazing. Bloody technology. Sometimes it's a real pain in the butt, isn't it? Anyway, hello, Rachel. G'day, David. Hello. I don't.
Gabriella.
Gabriella, thank you. Yeah.
And we have
Brett.
Intrepid here as well.
Yeah. Oh, I can't see him. But anyway, yeah, who am I? Andrew Hooker's my name. And I live, you can see I'm in a little building at the moment. And that's because I live nomadically, and my wife and I are currently looking after a little farm with 70 chickens to look after. So yeah, it's kind of fun. It's one of the things we've done for the last 5 or 6 years. Each year we come down here and look after a farmer's farm so he can, so he can go on holiday. Anyway, yes, I started landscape photography quite a few years ago, and eventually found that there's so many good photographers out there. And of course, we all think we're better than everybody when we start, don't we? And then reality brings us back to earth and we go, maybe I'm not that good. And then for me, I don't know about other people, but for me, I was looking for a niche where I could, something I could do. And I came across intentional camera movement. And for some reason, it just struck a chord. And I tried it, and I probably fluked it. It was probably just one of those things that happened. It was like, yeah, this is easy. I can do this. Why isn't everyone doing this now? And the images that I started to get, I got excited about. Other images that I'd taken, panoramas, all that sort of stuff. I got excited initially, but then it waned because it was just seemed, so hard. And Rachel's nodding, and she knows what I mean. And then it's just, you find something that stirs the emotion. Excuse me. The emotion for me is what makes the photo. Sure, you can get the great light. Sure, you can get the great composition. You can get all the great subjects, everything. But then you find that when you take the photo, it stirs an emotion inside you, more than just I got it. And that's where I found my passion for ICM. and I do nothing other than ICM now. I might take the odd photo with my phone so I can remember where I was when I took a particular image or made a particular image. But other than that, I don't take any straight photos, if you want to call them straight photos. So that's me, and that's how I got to where I am.
Yeah, well, it's great that you answered it in that way, because it was actually linked right into the topic of conversation that we're up to, in terms of like, how do you stay true to yourself and how do you differentiate yourself in a world where where there is a lot of photography or there's a lot of whatever style of art. So thank you for that, Andrew, and pleasure to have you here. Yeah, what about yourself, Intrepid?
Come on, Rob.
Sorry, I just had to get them. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I mean, people say, "Oh, everyone has a camera," but everyone has a microphone too. It doesn't make you a singer. And everyone has an oven. It doesn't make you a chef. And it's just a perception around photography. And it's something though. Like, I've specialized for a long time in trying to go to remote places, and most of my work. If you look at the rare earth inscriptions, like most people would never have seen those images of those locations anywhere else, right? That's kind of what I do. And I got really frustrated with Instagram and the algorithm on that, because, people would put up a picture of Lake Louise and it's like the same picture over and over again. And the algorithm looks and does like a fractal analysis of the picture and says, oh, people love this picture. And I'd put a terrible picture up of Lake Louise and it would get 5 times the views. And then, one of my first ordinal that was sold, it's of Devil's Thumb in Alaska, and it's from a location that you can only really shoot it from if you're on the water. And, it's just like, I'd never seen a picture like that of the Devil's Thumb. And most people don't even know what the Devil's Thumb is. Everyone is familiar with Patagonia, etc. But those mountains in southeast Alaska, they're not visited very often because you have to get there by sea. And I'd put it up and it would get like 1/10 of the views of the crappy picture from the car park at Lake Louise. And it just is so frustrating. And it's actually one of the things that drew me to NFTs, because when you look at traditional social media, it's like a collective popularity contest of certain locations, and you get like these IG hotspots, and everyone goes and shoots the same thing, and you're almost punished the more rare the picture is. Like if the algorithm can't recognize the picture, it won't promote it because it hasn't seen that picture before and it doesn't know if people are going to like it. Whereas I think NFTs basically is the first time where that kind of rarity can actually have more value, because people are like, wow, there's no one else has it. There is no other pictures like that. And so I think, that's something that drew me into the space, is that, this kind of more rare work that I have can find value. But I don't see it as a competition in terms of, is your work better than anyone else's work? Like it's, that's the same if you're a painter. Is your painting better than someone else's paintings? And there's a lot of reasons why some painters might become famous and other painters don't. But I think as well, as we're entering a transition phase into, what people call the age of indiscernibility, right? So if you look at the age of indiscernibility, we're just at this point and we're kind of almost there, but within the next 2 to 3 years, it'll be impossible to discern what is reality and what is not reality. You'll see a video of the president and you'll have no idea if it's a deep fake or if it's not a deep fake. You'll see a picture of a location. You'll have no idea if it was taken or not. And I think what becomes more important is the story around the work and the provenance of the person taking the work, and the ability of blockchain to basically to inscribe that work via an artist who has that provenance. Then you basically you'll be able to discern that that's actually a real photo, because there's a trust score associated with that account. So I think in 10 years, all journalists will have an on-chain identity, and basically you'll see pictures in your feed, and you'll cross-check against their on-chain identity to see, okay, is that bomb actually exploding in the Middle East, or is that just fake? And then there'll be a trust score that is kind of a peer-to-peer trust score on the blockchain. And that image will be minted. And there's even people looking at cameras with encrypted chips in them that create a hash at the moment you push the shutter, because people are like, oh, how do we actually know what's real in 10 years? Do we have to have direct shutter to blockchain capturing? And this is an actual verifiably true moment. And then, it's an infinite loop, because then people are hacking those chips, etc. But you're basically putting like a ledger data chip into a camera, so that when you take the picture, that goes straight from the sensor via the encryption onto the blockchain. But it's a crazy times we live in. I think it's going to get pretty exciting and scary at the same time in terms of where all that's going to go.
Yeah, that's fascinating conversation. Intrepid, maybe you need to invent a camera that you load up with a bit of Bitcoin, and when you take the photo, it inscribes it for you straight away with with the data, and you could pioneer that. But yeah, it is interesting to think that. It gets me thinking that obviously the ability to take photographs of documented points in history throughout time, there's countless ones. If you're into sport, there's like Michael Jordan, with his arm out in front, dunking it like a foot, 2 feet off, however many feet off the ground he is, because he could jump so far. Or like Peter Norman at the '68 Olympics on the podium with the Black Panther, with the two African American athletes, performing the Black Panther salute, and really powerful historical moments. So it is going to be important that we know that they are true or not. So yeah, interesting stuff. Rachel, and then NLV. Rachel, talk about, I guess, your work. And I guess, your work is, I think all of your work, so my question is not actually coming from me, it's more broadly for conversation. I think all of your work is unique and independent of what else people say, but how do you approach it personally?
Okay, there's so many thoughts, and I'll try to keep them pretty short. And
no, go for it. Go for it.
No, I'm known as Rambling Rachel, so don't let me.
It's nice alliteration, at least.
Great. Going back to what you said, Brett, earlier, was how everyone has the ability to create, and I think that is even more apparent with the rise of AI. Everyone who hasn't been able to have the confidence to paint, or have the time or the resources to do whatever form of art there is out there. Because let's be honest, art has become bougie and expensive to do for a lot of people. And it's really time consuming, especially if you have a job or a family and other responsibilities. It's not easy for most people. But with the rise of AI, I have seen, and I think everyone else has seen, a huge sort of flooding of creativity, of human energy into just creating things, into iterating things. And I think that's really beautiful of what's happening. Of course, on the flip side, we do have us photographers who are like, well, sometimes it takes us years to make something, and a lot more money, and a lot more time and education and skills, and a little bit of luck. Where do we fall in this sort of on wave of content? And I'm going to say something controversial here, but I don't think all content is art. But I do think all art is content, especially now in the digital age. So when we're thinking about how do we stand out as a creator within this digital space, I think we have to really focus on the context. We have to really focus on what we're bringing forth through our artistry and these tools that everyone has access to, but not everyone uses the same way. Like Andrew here, he was talking about how it's so emotive, it's such an emotional expression of himself. And I think that's beautiful, because that gives the context to the content that, anyone else can do, but they're not. Rob here, he was talking about the permanence and sort of the trust issue we have, especially with deep fakes and obviously AI coming out to be more and more, and some would argue better than photography. But, like Gabrielle here, she was talking about the process and using tools to express herself. She wasn't it doesn't matter what, that is a camera, essentially. It was, how can she get to her, to that vision she had? How can she create what she had in mind? And, obviously the camera, film, they're just tools. So to me, it's not about just because it's a photograph means it's better, because it's not. Arguably, it doesn't have to be. It's better for me because I love photography and I really value, in real life adventures and places and all. But, I think that has come with experience in photography. And this is where I'm going to go into like my sum up points of like, how do we stand out as a photographer in this digital age? For me, in the very beginning, when I picked up that camera, I was shooting so much, but I was shooting in a way that was trying to replicate all the great photographers I had seen. I was trying to replicate the people on Instagram. I was going to those spots. I was, trying to learn how to make those images that showed the life of a traveler. Because I travel constantly, full time. I don't have a house. I live out of my suitcase for the past, how many years has it been? A lot of years. So I think as a newbie, to any art form, we learn by replicating. We learn by copying, by what we see. And, the world essentially is an artist. Like Mother Nature is like the greatest artist of us all. I think there's no argument there. But in my experience of trying to find my artistic voice and trying to find what do I bring and why is it meaningful to even mint or bring as an ordinal forever on the blockchain, that's when anyone has to go in and really delve into, is this worth preserving? Is this worth sharing? Is this really something that represents me, my life, my emotions, my thoughts, my feelings? Yeah, let's go for it. And for me, I'm like, okay, my photographs have turned from trying to replicate the world, trying to replicate, these great, amazing photographers, to more expressing, kind of like Andrew, what did I feel? What were my emotions? Like, how can I express these incredible journeys that I've been lucky enough to have around the world, these incredible moments with people and animals and places? How can I express that in a way that is true to me? And it might not come across as totally unique and different, but it's true to me. And being authentic, especially in this day and age, I think plays a lot into being trustworthy. So yeah, lastly, and then we can go to an LV over here. I just think that any creative or any collector or any art patron or just anyone who's listening, whether you create or not, try to delve deeper into the context of what you do and what you support, because that is really where we bring the human side to this technology. And that, I believe, has far more value than any sort of, hype or trend or whatnot. Because, I still believe humans will have a huge role in the future, despite the singularity coming upon us. But yeah, now I'm rambling, but I really do believe that is the human aspect, that of our artistry that will forever be vital and fundamental to how we will value art and NFTs forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why, I know that's why we have these conversations and we have these podcasts and we put out these articles and we have these live streams, because behind all of the PFPs on X and all social media and all of this, there is a human. And I think that humans will mostly crave and want to have that human connection. So maybe it's idealistic, but I do hope humanity wins. But yeah, NLV, how do you view that? Well, we've got you on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, bit of connection issues, so I missed a bit of what Rachel said, but I got the gist, and I kind of just want to ditto everything she said there. Pretty much, like, for my own style, I guess, and my approach to the art of photography, I've always had a very graphic approach to communicating, and that sort of street art is what resonated with me at, I think I was 8 years old when I saw graffiti and breakdancing and hip hop culture, and was like, wow, I want to do that. Like, how do I get into that? And then through that first love and exploring that art form of street art. It's very graphic. It's very visceral and expressive and colorful, vibrant. There's a lot going on. And so when I found drone photography and aerial photography, I kind of quickly learnt the right time of day to get more vibrancy, get more, clarity out of things, different shadows that provide contrast. I was a graphic designer by trade. So not only just snapping the moment and being like, I've composed it, it looks good. There's a lot of post-production for me because I wanted to, as Rachel mentioned, I wanted to show people how I felt at the time and what that shot brings out of me. And I really love that I had that skill set with color, with contrast, balance, all the principles of graphic design they teach you. I applied that to my photography from the get-go, and that I think that gave me a very unique style. And a lot of photographers reached out to me on Instagram back in the day, and they're like, and how do you edit your stuff? And part of this community that I found, and I always had the same approach to Web 2, was I just love sharing and love to educate and give people tips and tricks. And it was like this, and I borrowed a lot of style from others as well. When I found drone photography, I couldn't work out how to edit the stuff at the beginning because it was like very different to normal camera sensors, and colors were very different. Blues were green. So you had to like really adjust in post a lot of the time. And so a lot of people were really helpful when I first joined, and I've just had that approach ever since. And I find that with Web3, the beauty of this space is, like Rob said, it's not a competition of, who's going to be the top. It's like we've all got a story to tell. We've all got skills, different skill sets, different experiences, different things to communicate, different stories. And I think that's why I love this space, and that's why I feel like I belong here and I connect with so many people, is because a lot of people have that same mentality. Whereas Instagram and the other traditional platforms that creators had to express themselves, it's very much like there's a top gun and maybe 3 or 4 others up there, and everyone else is just battling to get their stuff seen all the time. And the algorithms like picks people to be the top, and it works as like a competition mentally, because everyone's like, well, I want to get that. And so they're constantly frustrated and annoyed. And these guys at the top, their art isn't particularly, 1,000 times better than everyone else, but they're getting 1,000 times the engagement. And that's what drives more people to really post more. And I just got exhausted from that game. I did get success, and I had print sales, and it paid for my first camera setup and stuff like that. But it was exhausting. I was posting twice a day, every day of the week. I'd have Sundays off. That was it. My poor wife, she's just like, what are you doing? But this space, I find now, I've done that hard work. I've put in all the effort, and when I share stuff, it resonates, and it's a much more enjoyable experience for that reason, I think. So kind of went off topic there a little bit, but I think the main point is, in terms of my approach to photography particularly, I like to really translate the moment in my own way. As what Rachel said, I really resonated with. So yeah.
No, it's spot on, and all of that is relevant because there's no like one train or one track of thought. Everything's always impacted by other factors, of course. So Andrew, I'm curious. You said once you found ICM, that's what really resonated with you, and you loved it. You found that was the way you could express yourself. Can you elaborate on that? What was it about it? Why, when you saw it, why did it strike you as the way you could tell your story, or paint the picture, so to speak, with your camera?
Yeah, it was kind of a surreal moment when I first realized that I could do it. Like I said, I was actually looking for a way, to take photos. It was just something. So let me sort of just duck back a little bit. When my wife and I first became nomadic and hit the road, I remember reading somewhere that somebody said living 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year with your spouse is going to cause problems, and you need a hobby. And I thought, oh, okay. So that's where my photography actually started. And that was 15 years ago. But the ICM came in where, like I said before, I was just searching for something that I could do that was me. It wasn't, as other people have said, we all go to those iconic places and try and replicate the photos, and whether it's for likes or to sell or for whatever whatever floats your boat. But um, I found I could take a photo, but it wasn't that great, and my processes it wasn't that great. But when I did ICM, I could do ICM at any time of the day, or well, not quite night, but you know what I mean. I didn't have to be there for sunrise. I didn't have to be there for sunset. I didn't have to pick the right time of the day, because generally you can do ICM at any time. Sure, you might have to throw a filter on or something. Use your settings to block the blown out highlights, but you can do it anywhere, anytime. And I think that was one of the things that really attracted me is we'd be driving down the road going from one campsite to another campsite that we wanted to look at, and I'd see something just in the corner of my eye when I have to pull over and have a look because the contrast, the light, the shape, whatever it was that just grabbed me and said, hey, look at this. And nature does that. Talking to the wife, she just come back. She must have forgot something. So it's that sort of spontaneity that helps. And the ICM, so I can do it anytime, I can do it anywhere, at any stage. And that also meant a big thing for me because I could just do it. I didn't have to, find a campsite, just, drive to somewhere, drive back to where we were. And it could have been 100 Ks away. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not that keen. So there was a lot of things come into play, but like I said, it was the emotion of the ICM that, I don't know, like, when you go somewhere and you see a beautiful scene, and remembering that a beautiful view doesn't always mean a good photograph, it would just strike you. It was like a wet fish in the face. And you really wake up and you think, oh, wow. Well, I found that's what happened with me with ICM, and that's why I got hooked on it. I've probably gone off topic here, but it's just, I don't know, it just took. And when I did the ICM, so I get back to where I saw the spot, right, or I find this place, and I'm walking through the bush and I see something, and you go, wow, and it stops you in your tracks and it takes your breath away, and you go, damn, that's good. I got to try and take a photo of that. And then there's all the components of ICM. There's the amount of movement that you use depends on how much grain, how much, it looks like a painting, or whether it just looks like, cat vomit. And then you've got to get the composition right, because remember, you're moving your camera. So you want it to start there and finish there, but can you get that? And can you get that right amount of movement to get the image you want? So there's the technical side of it as well. And it's the emotion through seeing the scene, and then it's the challenge. The hunt is on. Can I get that photo? And then I get this thing in my head where I go, I want it to look like this. And then it'll take me 24 times and I'll get the composition right, or I'll get the movement right, but I won't get the composition right, and vice versa. And then when I get it, it's like, oh my God, that's what I wanted. And the emotion comes up, and then there's this like inner peace. I don't know how to describe that, but it's like you get the emotion of finding the image you want to make, the place. It installs that emotion in you, and then you go through the trials and tribulation of making that image. And then when you get that image, there's like, oh, how good is that? And then you just look at it on the back of the camera for ages and ages. And I'll take 200, 300 photos and get one or two good ones. And I'll come back and the wife will say, where have you been? What have you been doing? So, just looking around, taking photos. So that's what ICM does for me. And that's, why it's just my life now. I don't do any other photography other than it. It's a drug, I've got to say. It really is a drug, and so addictive. So, yeah, I probably went off topic there, but anyway.
No, I think you summed it up really well, even at the end. And it's like how Rachel said earlier, it feels authentic to you. And I think when it feels authentic to the artist, that's when it's right. That's when you're doing it. That's when you're happy to put it out in the world, because you can hear that passion. And also for people who,
it's part of you.
Yeah, exactly. And you said 100 Ks for our American listeners. That's like 60 miles for our American listeners.
60 miles,
100 Ks, but
yeah.
No, I love it. Yeah. Well, you made another interesting comment, which I'm going to get Intrepid to maybe speak on. You said that a beautiful view doesn't necessarily mean a beautiful photo, because Intrepid, you've gone to some, wild places, crazily beautiful places, striking places, throughout, I guess, your journey, but particularly if people know your story and how you've been living on a boat for a number of years now. Can you comment on that? How do you capture the beautiful place with a great photo? Because it's fascinating that a beautiful place doesn't necessarily mean a wonderful photo. A lot of amateur photographers would definitely know that. You're like, why can't I get this photo? It's like, well, I'm an amateur. It makes sense. But yeah, Intrepid, I'd love for you to comment on that.
Yeah, so I think it's a true statement that there's some places that are striking in real life that don't take great photos, and other places that aren't that striking in real life and take amazing photos. So it's, that's part of the art of the deception of the photography, I think. But if I just go back a little bit to Rachel and NLV's comment about, the story, that's why I see photography as essentially like augmented storytelling. And I think this is, one of the original questions, like, if there's 1,000 pictures that are the same, why would you collect one over the others? And I think 9 times out of 10, there's going to be the story around that picture. And humans are storytellers. Like, we've spent hundreds of thousands of years sitting around the campfire telling stories. And then at some point, someone picked up a piece of chalk and started drawing on the cave while they're telling the story around the campfire. And that's kind of the genesis of art. It's something to augment the storytelling. But I think fundamentally, the more AI takes over everything, the more we're going to go back to that storytelling. But people still want that human storytelling connection. But I feel like one of the things with, that I do a lot of travel. I've traveled, I've shot in over 60 countries. But I'm not one of those travelers with a backpack that goes around quickly. I do slow travel. So we sail to a country, we'll spend a month there, then we sail to another country. And it's a bit like if I said to, if I said to NLV, okay, I want you to write a 2-page character assessment on Brett. You couldn't just turn up and spend 10 minutes with Brett and write that character assessment. I think photography is a bit like that. You can't just turn up at the lookout and take a picture and it'd be amazing. You have to, if NLV wanted the best character assessment of Brett, he would have to spend, weeks with Brett, talking to him, seeing what his moods are like, which is the best mood to portray. And photography is no different. You need to kind of hang out with the location. And, I often, I rarely, I've got quite a lot of expensive camera gear now because I'm middle-aged and I can afford it. When I started in my late teens and early 20s, I had terrible, crappy gear, and I think gear is overrated. It's more the time you spend and the way you do your composition. But sometimes it takes. So I typically would go out just with my iPhone and take a few pictures, and I might go back somewhere 3 or 4 times before I actually bothered to bring my proper camera gear, because I'm like, okay, I want to be here at this time of the day. I want the tide to be doing this. I want et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, a lot of people who aren't photographers perhaps don't understand that aspect of it, but you really have to know the moods of the location and when the light's going to be at certain angles. And, we've got more tools in our kit now than ever with the drones and, circular polarizers on the drones and all these amazing lightweight telephoto lenses. And it's, if I could have had half of that gear when I was 20, it would have been amazing. But you can have all the gear in the world, but if you're at the wrong time of day, even if you're at the right location, it doesn't mean anything. You're going to take a shot that no one's going to even look at twice.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where the storytelling component comes through, and obviously the experience and understanding what makes the shot. Gabriella, a lot of that then made me think of obviously the recent film which you created about your grandma, and how earlier you mentioned you have done portrait photography, and even obviously the still lives of flowers and whatnot, which people would see in your profile. But yeah, tell us about that storytelling component. You said you weren't scared to sort of go up to someone and ask to take a photo. What drew you to do that? And then how was that like a portrayal of how you were feeling or the story you were trying to tell?
Well, at that time I was like 16 years old. So I guess that took a bit, like I am a bit of an extrovert, but also I have times where I need to be like recharging. So that part of my personality, it's like easygoing in the sense that if I find that I can have a conversation with someone and the person is like open to it, then I like to explore and understand like their vision, their world, and what they like, what they don't like, what they do, right? So I feel like photography has always been a tool for me to kind of like dig a little bit deeper on that. I don't have this work on chain, but for example, I have a series where I have portrayed many women artists in my community. So I will go to their studios and just portray like even little details that they have, like on their working table or the light at their studio. Just try to explore and really feel the atmosphere they're living in. And part of that also, I think it's why I documented so much of my grandmother since early years. Like since 16, 17 years old, I documented so much about her, and she loved that. She loved when I was with my camera or just recording a conversation or a recipe that she did. I don't know, she loved to do desserts, so I would sometimes like record with her, and she will be like, okay, now let's do this and let's do that. So she became part of it. And I think that's the magic too about filmmaking and photography, that it's like a two-way street, or a more way street, not only two-way. Like it can be so many way street, right? Because we are just there like absorbing what's in front of us, and actually discerning what we want in our shot or what we don't want in our shot, right? And that's in that sense is where storytelling like completes the visual part of it. So yeah, that's how I try to construct my work. And this film particularly, I also love, and I have been like a huge fan of archive.org, which is like an archival website. They shut it down for a bit. I was sad, and then it came back up. I love archival photos from my family, from my grandmother. That's a lot of what I also love to work with, because I can see so many points of view of her friends or her family that used to take photos in a very different way that we do now. So I just feel it's just such a complex medium, and at the same time so variable that it can be used in so many ways. I don't know if I answered the question. I feel like I just went like so many.
Trust me, that's the point. That's the whole point of this conversation is for this storytelling. Look, as we start to wrap up, because, oh, wow, we've gone almost an hour, 10 times flown past. Gabriella, we'll start again with you, and then, we'll go around the room. So I'll ask the next person. But it might seem like a bit of a straightforward question, but I just want you to say, like, what is photography? And then maybe, what is photography to you? It's a bit of a I know that, yeah, let's see what you all come up with, but I'd love to hear that from you all. So, we'll hear again from Gabriella, and then we'll head to Rachel and head around the group. I'd love to finish off with, what is photography? And then, like, what is photography to you? So, Gabriella, I'm going to throw you on the spot. You got to go first.
Oh, wow. That's a difficult question. I mean, from my point of view, which is like, I'm very mixed media, like towards that area. So for me, it's a great tool. It's a great medium where I can capture and I can get to know people through photography. I can get to know experiences, moments, and even like something more complex than that. Like just it's an excuse for me to just dig deeper into a moment, an experience, or just being able to connect, right? And I feel like from everyone will be a different point of view, because what we like to document, like maybe landscapes, maybe nature, for me it's like people, still life stories that can grow complexly into films. Not that the photography can be also so very complex when you do photojournalism or like photo books, which I also really love photo books. So it's just this amazing tool and medium to dig deeper into the experience of life, into any kind of story you want to understand more. And that's how I see it. For me, it's just it has been part of my life since I'm a teenager, and it has also been a way for me to get to know a bit of the story of my family or of the world. And photography right now, it's at a turning point with all that it's happening, but I don't think it's at risk. I just think it's part of the evolution of what like happened with painting or other mediums and things that have been evolving through time. We're just living in a very crazy moment, I think, but I am also grateful for being living in this moment where we can see all of these changes and evolve with them. And yeah, so I am very grateful to be here and be able to answer this question. I hope
Hey,
that
thank you
was
so
good.
much. Thank you so much. It was really well said. Rachel, what about yourself?
Thank you.
Could you just repeat the question?
Of
for
course,
me?
you can take it wherever you like. Essentially, what is photography, and then what is it to you?
Okay, gosh. To keep it short, and hi to like the 500 of you who are listening into this live stream. That's incredible. It's super awesome. And it's so fun to see so much support for photography. Wow. Yeah. Super exciting. Wow. That just gave me chills. So what does photography mean to me? Wow. Well, a couple years ago, well, several years ago now, I took a DNA test because I was abandoned as a kid. So I'm adopted. My medical history is like a blank. So I took a DNA test just to like understand who I was a little bit. And they said, the DNA test said that I was at high risk of losing my memory and mind early in life. And that like really scared me. Let's just say it terrified me. Because I'm a visual person, and to lose my memories, like Alzheimer's, I've seen it happen with family. It's devastating, and it's hard on other people as well. So it really kicked my butt really into traveling myself, into embracing my youth and my health to just like explore the world. And I know Intrepid Rob, he was talking about his process of how he really likes to go back to a place and be very intentional, and his process is more slow. And I think that's beautiful. And sometimes I do that. But most of the time, my photography and my art specifically is a reflection of my greatest work of art, and that is my life. I think, or I like to believe that my life, the way I'm living and what I do it's impossible to replicate. And it's so personable and personal to me that I want my photographs to share glimpses into that. And photography, it's that quick moment that we're freezing and then preserving forever as ordinals. I think that it's such like a contrast right there. You know, photography freezing a moment in time, and then Bitcoin like preserving that moment in time. It's incredible, and I really love it. But going back to what does photography mean to me? Photography is memories. And when I look back at my photographs, I want to remember where I was, what I was feeling, because that's how I edit. I really edit based on my feelings of nostalgia, of reliving that moment. Sometimes it takes me months to go back to an image to really edit it in a way that I think is true to what I felt or what I experienced. So to sum it up, photography is memories. And I believe that ordinals says that that memory mattered and that it will matter tomorrow, not just to me, but to other people. And I think that's a really big responsibility that all of us here on the stage, at Gamma, on the blockchain, on ETH, all these different blockchains, we are really, I'm getting emotional. Anyway, we are leading the way in this responsibility of preserving this world, of preserving our culture, and of just preserving human expression and creativity. And whether that's with a paintbrush or with a machine, we choose the camera. It's really beautiful. And last but not least, a picture says 1,000 words. That's a very common phrase that I grew up with in the USA. And I would just question that with the follow-up question of, what are those 1,000 words? Because you might think it's a passive, like, oh, here's a picture, now you'd put the 1,000 words. But as an artist, we kind of bring forth kind of the theme of those 1,000 words. So just because it's just a picture or a still or a short clip or a movie or a documentary, there are words that are coming forth through those images, and that is really powerful. So yeah, that's why I love photography.
It is very powerful, and I appreciate you being so honest and vulnerable in your answer, Rachel. Thanks for that. It was a beautiful answer. NLV, what about yourself?
Whoop, sorry, mute again. It's so many things, man. Like, I probably wouldn't be able to get to all of them, but some highlights for me are the predominant thing that I've found for myself on a personal level. Actually, sorry, no. Photography is important. I think it's, like Rachel said, a powerful tool for documentary. There is a responsibility with it that I feel as well, to accurately record what we see around us in our vicinity. Like Andrew said, he can't travel 100 kilometers to get shots every single day. He has to stay local. And I think that photographers should be documenting what is local to them, rather than chasing shots that everyone's gotten in Paris. We all live in different areas of the world. And so I believe that the more people that are authentic to their area, the better representation history will have of the world at this moment in time, this short 100 years, or if we're lucky, 80 years. I don't know. That really stands out to me for what photography really means and what it is. Not just a fun hobby for people to, it can be that, obviously, but that's the deeper level. Like Rachel said, going deeper and exploring stories. I honestly think that's the standout that photography brings as an art form. It's like even though you're being creative and you're creating art with it, you are taking a snapshot in time. And I will add as well the power of the blockchain being added to that equation. It's still sinking in for me. Like the power of that, I still haven't quite grasped it. And I don't think we will in our lifetimes. I think it's 1,000 years from now when people will actually understand exactly the strength of what we're living in right now. It'll be a historical thing more than a present moment thing for me anyway, because every day I come on to Web3 and I log in and I look at art and I might want to do a series and drop some art or whatever. It's like, this is mind blowing. Like I can't process it. It's like, it's not like it's a boring thing of like, oh yeah, upload a photo, blah, blah, blah. It's like every day there's some new technology, there's a new approach, someone's doing something different. I'm learning every single day. And so, yeah, I just wanted to add that as well. But on a personal level, what photography is to me is it's therapy. It has helped me with my mental health, and it has helped me process some really hard things. And it has given me a love for creativity that I kind of lost at one point. It kind of drove me to fall in love with creating for myself and not just making money. I went through a time where I was just trying to support my family no matter what it took, and art didn't really fit into that. And so finding that love again and that enjoyment of being out in nature, and then coming back from the experience of that and having that healing moment of meditation, which, you know, being an artist, having anxiety my entire life and not really understanding what that even meant. It just was me. I was struggling, but that just was my experience. Finding something that counteracted that for me has been so powerful and so enjoyable. And then, coming back from those healing experiences into my studio and spending time with those images and you know, like Rachel said, it might even be a year later that I go back through my catalog and go, oh, wow, that's right. I remember that. Oh, I was going through some really hard shit in life, but that moment, it really was a beautiful time. And so you have this sort of bank of memories that you can re-explore at any time in your life. And that's really beautiful, you know. And I have like 14 terabytes of cinematic film of my kids. You know, I have their whole births. The doctor, he was a photographer himself, our obstetrician. So he was like, look, I'm not really meant to allow film in here, but like, let's just pretend you're taking snapshots, but you can record it and we won't tell anyone. So I've got like, I documented the birth of my children in a way that not many people probably have. And it's raw, it's visceral. So yeah, there's memories that I have that I still haven't even looked at. And I think I'm going to be relying on AI at some point. Like 6529 talks about, where he said, just shoot everything. Just shoot as much as you can. Don't worry about the editing side. You're going to have AI that literally takes your files, upload it to a cloud somewhere, and it creates a short film of those moments for you and stuff like that. And, you know, not to say that that's going to be the solution for photography. I want to keep it more manual for myself and stuff. But when you've got that much content, it's not going to be easy to process. So yeah, it's therapy for me, but it's also technology that I don't think is going anywhere. It's only going to improve and gel with what we do in our lives throughout history from now. I think it's such a powerful tool. There's no threat to it, as others have said. And with the blockchain particularly, it's going to be even more important to record actual, authentic, real moments that are discernible.
Yeah, I love that. It's actually extremely coincidental. I was looking at some photos of the kids from when they were little. They're still little. They're still kids, but little yesterday. And just had that moment where I was like, if I didn't have these photos, I wouldn't. It's very hard to sort of go back to that point specifically in your mind. And it's not just with kids. It can be with anything. There's a classic photo. My grandma, she's from New Zealand, and she was born in New Zealand, and she was a model back in the day. And she was from an era where photography was just black and white. And in order to have color on the photo, there were these people who were unbelievably talented who would like paint, or kind of like, I assume it was paint the photos to bring out the color that was there. And I was looking at that somewhat recently as well. And it really makes you realize, whatever the photo is of a person or not, how it is that ability of like, or that photography is that sort of preservation of history. And I mentioned earlier, in that sporting sense as well, we seem to have lost Andrew. So if he comes back, we'll get to him. But otherwise, I have, you know, obviously say thank you and get you all to say a little something at the end as well. But we'll finish off with this question, for Intrepid, in terms of like, what is photography? We've had some, you know, wonderful answers, and what is it to you? But I'm sure we're going to get a unique perspective here as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Look, I think that what differentiates photography from every other medium is that it's actually the capturing of light. Like it's light. So you're taking a snapshot of that moment in time, and that's very different to every other kind of visual medium in that it's actually based in reality. So when I look at photography, and I look at, if you look at the history of photography in terms of the impact it's had on societal norms, and how photography has been able to adjust the way society works, because it provides a reflection of themselves in some ways. Like if you think of famous photos like the Tank Man, from Tiananmen Square, or the Napalm Girl in Vietnam in the war, or even just like Paul Nicklon's work with polar bears in the 90s. Before that, people didn't really even know anything about polar bears, and then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, the ice is melting, these bears are dying, and that created a whole movement of trying to, adjust the environment, what the impact we're having on the environment. And I think society as a whole, like we're all obsessed in our own little bubbles, right? And there's a lot of apathy, societal apathy, I think, is only getting worse. And as we get more into a virtual world where people can just stay at home with the VR goggles or the augmented reality Neuralink, the apathy is going to become extreme, I think, in terms of like, well, there's this little island on the map. What does it even matter if it exists or not? If I'm just here in my little own VR world. And I think photography will become more and more important in terms of documenting these places so that people know that they exist and that there's ecosystems there, and that there's a reason for them to continue to exist, because humans, as they get more and more powerful, can just eliminate things with the push of a button. And so I think that's, to me, if you look, there's a great there's a photographer called Burton Holmes, and if you haven't seen his work, you should just Google it. But there's a book called The Man Who Photographed the World, 1886 to 1938. So he was like the first Instagram photographer, really, and he started in 1886, and he traveled around the world, and like he's in the Sino-Japanese, like the Russian-Japanese War, and he's just got these crazy photos, and they, in some ways, like are just photos of simple things, like just people sitting having coffee in Paris, or he photographed all through World War One, but you look back and it's actually those moments in time now that just seem so foreign, right? So, you take some pictures on your iPhone, but vault that for 100 years, they will be incredibly valuable to the future society. And this is one of to tie it back to Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is like the modern ledger of society. And, I kind of put inscribing on Bitcoin, it's a bit, to me, like doing some graffiti on the side of the Colosseum, right? Like we've kind of lost the culture that was Rome, but we can go to the Colosseum and you can see some 2,000-year-old graffiti, and you can see what they wrote, and there's a few little pictures there. And it's like, same thing if you go to Abu Simbel in Egypt, there's Greek graffiti from 2,000 years later, and the Greeks came there and they graffitied their little bit. And it's like, now we're kind of graffitiing onto Bitcoin. I think in 1,000 years, people might look back and Bitcoin might be quaint by then. And it's like, look at all this crazy shit that these guys put on the blockchain. And I think photography being on Bitcoin is really important because it is actually capturing that reality. This is actually what, the light that was falling on the earth that was being reflected into the sensor or the film or whatever you were using to capture it. And I think that's an important part of our history that going forward. And just that, to trying to overcome that societal apathy in terms of both cultural and nature-based. It's not just about conservation of nature, but like the more cross-cultural fertilization you can have, the more tolerance you have for different cultures and things like that. So, I think it's a really important aspect that's often overlooked.
Thanks for that. No, couldn't agree more. And I can't remember who the quote is. It might have been like Louis Daguerre, so like one of the earliest photographers. I've got to look it up, or people can look it up. It's something like he's captured light, I've arrested its flight, or something like that. There's a really classic old quote that went something like that, but hopefully I'm right there. Andrew, we lost you for a sec, but you're back. Would love to, finish up with your thoughts on, what photography really is for you.
Yeah, I must have jinxed myself at the start by saying technology is great, but it wasn't so great for a little second, was it? Anyway, I managed to navigate my way back. So apologies for that. What is photography? Well, didn't somebody say, or isn't the definition of photography is drawing with light? Something along those lines. So that's something that sits with me, and I call it painting with light, or painting with my camera. So I guess it's close. And what is it for me? Well, it's everything, but it's my escape. It's my zen. It's my excitement. It's what brings me alive, and it keeps this grey matter. Keeps the grey at bay, I hope. So it's just an important part of my life, and I love it. And I love sharing what I do or what I can create, and you know, the Web3 thing. Well, you know, I'm in my past my mid 60s now. So some of you have got a lot longer than I've got to go. So but you know, the great thing about it is that when it's on chain, what I create now, what excites me now, what you know, drives me, will be around certainly a damn sight longer than I will ever be. But I think the challenge is how do we enjoy it now, and how do I maximize the benefit of what I do and what Web3 can do for me now. But in years to come, and in thousands of years to come, you know, when Trigamma is the only place on the earth that's, you know, got Bitcoin, yeah, how will they view it, and will they look back at not only at the art, how good is it or how bad is it, and as Rob said, you know, the graffiti on the side of the Colosseum. But will they also look back at the people that created it and try and get into their minds through the art that they see, because they won't be able to ask them about it. And will they consider it to be, you know, well, will be a documentation of the time and what you saw and what you did, but what will it do for them at that time? You know, in 1,000 years, what will a picture I've created do for somebody else? You know, so there's interest at both ends of the scale. What will it do for me right now? What is my place in Web3, and what will it do for somebody at the other end? We'll never know, but you know, you can enjoy the thought of what it might do. And if it's like Rob says, you know, it's historic, then you know, kudos to us, hey.
Well, that's what we're here for, and that's what we think. I just looked it up. I was quite close. At least I got the name right. So it was Louis Daguerre, and he said, "I have seized the light. I have arrested his flight. The sun himself in future shall draw my pictures." I just find that a classic. I think that's a great place to leave it. You know, like you said, Andrew, and then it's been echoed throughout from all of you. Thanks so much to each of you. So Gabriella, Rachel, Andrew, NLV, and Intrepid for being here and sharing your thoughts. It really is about the human, the storytelling, the emotion, preserving that history, capturing a moment, you know, showing what is real, what existed, using all of the tools. It's been such an inspiring conversation. So I'll let you all unmute if you're muted. And, you know, thanks so much for your time, and a real pleasure to have you, and can't wait to see what else you bring to Bitcoin, but also for the work, and just for being you and being part of our journey at Gamma as well.
Well,
Thank you so much
we
for having us.
Grateful for you.
yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you,
thanks,
Brett. It's what you've done started off and completely innovative, continually innovative with the things you're coming up with, where a lot of other places are just stagnant and, you know, following their storyline, but it's not as good as Gamma. So yeah, kudos to you guys. Keep doing whatever you're doing, because I reckon it's bloody great. And you know, Rachel, David, Rob, Gabriella, awesome to see you guys online. We do a lot of stuff through X and everything else, and we never see each other, do we? So this is like, you know, yeah, let's do some more.
Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Brett, for putting the spotlight onto photography. You know, there's not enough of it. It's a very underrated art form in Web3, which, you know, is, I don't know, I don't understand it personally, but it's really great to have, it's really great to have your support and get a bit of a spotlight talking about creating with light. Yeah. Appreciate it, mate. And thanks for all your help with the Gamma stuff. You know, if anyone is interested in inscribing ordinals, particularly with Gamma, I'd highly encourage you to reach out, because Brett's very helpful, and it's not as scary as it seems at first.
That's it. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Once again, thanks so much for your time. Yes, this has been a blast.